I've always been a skeptic. Ghosts, spirits, and haunted houses were just tales to keep children in line or to entertain the bored. But all that changed when I bought the house on Hollow Hill. The price was suspiciously low for such a large property. A sprawling Victorian mansion, nestled deep within the woods. It had been on the market for years. The locals avoided it, whispering about the previous owners who had mysteriously vanished. I scoffed at the tales, convinced that they were just stories to deter buyers. I should have listened. The first few nights were quiet, almost too quiet. The house creaked and groaned as old houses do, but there was something else, something that felt off. It was as if the house was breathing, exhaling long, slow breaths that echoed through the corridors. On the fourth night, I noticed something peculiar. The shadows seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I began to hear faint whispers, indistinct and distant, like a conversation happening just out of earshot. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started exploring the house more thoroughly. The basement was the first place I checked, a dark, damp space that seemed to pull the warmth from the air. The smell of mildew was thick, but there was something else, a metallic scent that made my stomach turn. In the far corner, I found an old wooden door, its surface cracked and weathered. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to open it. Inside was a small room, barely more than a closet, with walls covered in strange symbols. They were carved deep into the stone, and as I traced my fingers over them, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. That night, the whispers grew louder. They were angry now, filled with malice. I could feel their presence, a weight that pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. My dreams were filled with horrifying images, faces contorted in pain, twisted bodies trapped in the walls, their eyes wide with terror. When I woke, the room was freezing, and I could see my breath misting in the air. The shadows in the corners seemed to pulse, like something was hiding within them, waiting for the right moment to strike. I tried to rationalize it, blaming the old heating system and my overactive imagination, but deep down, I knew something was very wrong. The next day, I decided to leave. I packed my bags and headed for the front door, but as I reached for the handle, it refused to turn. The door wouldn't budge. Panic set in as I tried the back door, then the windows, but they were all sealed shut, as if the house itself was holding me captive. The whispers turned to screams that night, echoing through the walls, filling every room with a deafening cacophony. The house trembled, and I could feel something moving beneath the floorboards, something alive and hungry. I ran to the basement, hoping to find a way out through the small window there, but as I descended the stairs, I felt the air grow thick with decay. The wooden door was open, and from within the small room, a pair of eyes stared back at me, glowing faintly in the darkness. I can't describe the terror that gripped me. It was as if those eyes were peering into my soul, seeing every fear, every doubt I had ever harbored. The symbols on the walls began to glow, pulsating with a sickly green light, and the thing in the shadows began to move toward me, its form shifting and contorting as it emerged. I turned and fled, the house shaking violently as if enraged by my escape. I don't know how I managed it, but I found myself outside, the cool night air washing over me. The house stood silent, its windows dark, but I could still feel its gaze, watching me, waiting. I never returned to Hollow Hill. The house remains there, silent and brooding, its dark secrets hidden within its walls. I've tried to forget, to move on, but the nightmares persist, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear the whispers calling me back. Months passed, but the memories of Hollow Hill clung to me like a shadow. I moved far away, to a bustling city where the constant noise and crowds should have drowned out the whispers that haunted me. But they didn't. Instead, they grew louder, more insistent, as if the house had found a way to reach me even here. I tried everything to forget, therapy, medication, even rituals suggested by those who believed in the supernatural. Nothing worked. The eyes I had seen in that basement, the glowing symbols, and the feeling of something ancient and malevolent lurking just beyond the veil of reality haunted my every waking moment. One night, after a particularly vivid nightmare where the walls of my apartment began to close in on me, I woke up with a start. The air was thick with that same metallic scent I had encountered in the basement. My heart raced as I realized it wasn't just a memory. The smell was real, here, in my new home. I leaped out of bed, searching frantically for the source, but there was nothing. The apartment was still, almost unnaturally so, as if the very air was holding its breath. Then, I noticed it, a small smear of dark, sticky substance on the wall opposite my bed. It hadn't been there before. As I approached, the scent grew stronger, and when I touched it, my fingers came away wet, covered in a viscous, reddish-brown fluid. My mind raced. Was this blood? I backed away, my eyes darting around the room, expecting to see something emerging from the shadows. But nothing came. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, and the faint, distant whisper that seemed to echo in my mind. I didn't sleep that night, and when the first light of dawn broke through the window, I grabbed my phone and called the realtor who had sold me the house. I needed answers. To my surprise, the line was dead. It was as if the number had been disconnected. I searched online, but there was no trace of the agency. It was as if they had never existed. Panic set in as I realized I was on my own. Whatever had followed me from Hollow Hill was growing stronger, and I had no idea how to stop it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I made a decision. I would return to Hollow Hill. It was the last place I wanted to go, but I had to know what was happening to me. If I didn't, I was certain the house would consume me, even from a distance. The drive back was surreal. The landscape seemed to warp and twist as I neared the woods surrounding Hollow Hill. Trees loomed over the road, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands, and the sky darkened unnaturally, a heavy blanket of clouds blotting out the stars. When I finally arrived, the house stood as it had before, silent and foreboding. The windows were dark, and the front door creaked open as I approached, as if inviting me in. I hesitated, but the whispers were louder now, almost a roar in my ears, and I knew I had no choice. The air inside was thick, oppressive, as if the house itself was alive and aware of my presence. I made my way back to the basement, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The wooden door was closed, but as I reached for the handle, it swung open on its own, revealing the small room with the carved symbols. But this time there was something else. In the center of the room, where there had been only dust and decay, stood a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes were the same glowing orbs I had seen before, but now they were filled with a malevolent intelligence. "You shouldn't have come back," it whispered, its voice a raspy hiss that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I stumbled backward, but the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me inside. The figure stepped forward, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it was being controlled by invisible strings. The symbols on the walls began to glow again, casting the room in an eerie green light. "I've been waiting," it continued, "waiting for someone like you, someone who wouldn't just see, but understand." "Understand what?" I managed to choke out, my back pressed against the cold stone wall. The figure's mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. "The house, it's not just a place. It's a doorway, a gateway to something beyond your comprehension. And you've opened it." I shook my head, refusing to believe what I was hearing. But deep down, I knew it was true. The house had chosen me, marked me in some way, and now there was no escape. The walls began to tremble, the symbols pulsing faster as the figure reached out toward me. Its touch was like ice, freezing me in place as the room seemed to spin, the air thickening until I could barely breathe. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the figure's eyes, burning into mine with a hatred that seemed to reach into my very soul. When I woke, I was back in my apartment. The sun was shining, and everything seemed normal, too normal. But I knew it was a lie. The house on Hollow Hill had claimed me, and now it was only a matter of time before it came to collect. The whispers were gone, replaced by a deafening silence that was somehow even worse. I don't know how long I have before it finds me again, but I can feel it growing closer with each passing day. The house is still out there, waiting for its next victim, and I'm powerless to stop it. All I can do is wait and hope that when it finally comes, I'll have the strength to face whatever lies beyond that doorway.